Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, June 29th, 2023, and we're here at the Transportation Commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting, which means we are joined in person and virtually. My name is Bridget Obikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission liaison, and this meeting is being recorded. So if you are joined virtually, please turn off your mics in Teams if you are not speaking. Before the start of the agenda items, are there any items or any citizen comments on items not on the agenda? Hearing none, I will then turn the meeting over to Chairman Chris Latt.
Great, thank you very much. I have nothing specific before we get going with this meeting, so I will turn it back over to you to head on to the first real agenda item.
Okay, we have Neighborhood Complete Streets Capital Projects. This is an action item with Michelle Stafford and Elisa Ortez.
Hi, everyone. This is Elisa Ortiz. I am the chair of the Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission. And Michelle, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Michelle Stafford. I am the program manager for Neighborhood Complete Streets, working in DES, and I will be operating the slideshow.
Thank you, Michelle. So thank you, commissioners and Chairman Slatt, for having us here today. We are here to share about the latest round of Complete Streets projects that just recently went through the Complete Streets funding hearing process, actually on Monday of this week. And we will share these projects with you and request an action item in terms of your support to share them and recommend them for funding to the Arlington County Board. So first, we just want to give you a very quick overview. We've been in front of the commission before, so hopefully some of you are familiar with this, but if not, we just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the Neighborhood Complete Streets workflow process looks like. We are at between stages 5 and 6 on this chart when you look from left to right. So first off, we start with problem identification and application, which we have an ongoing list of projects to work on that are then evaluated, scored, and ranked based on the severity of different projects in terms of things like we evaluate them on a number of different criteria, crashes with accidents, lack of sidewalk or obstructed sidewalk, etc. There's lots of other information there. And each of these sections here shows you sort of when this has happened for this latest round. The third part is project selection, scoping, and concept development. The staff work on this and then move into public engagement to share with folks, locally in the neighborhood about the project and get their thoughts and feedback on what to do in terms of how to make the street safer and more complete. And then once that public engagement and project scoping process is at about I think, what are we, 10%, Michelle, or 30%, somewhere sort of relatively early in the design process. It then comes back to the Complete Streets Commission, Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission, for a funding hearing. And so when we do the funding hearing, the staff bring us, some of the details of the project, what the design, the sort of early design looks like, and what the estimated cost will be. And then the Complete Streets Commission votes. And on Monday, we voted to recommend 3 projects for approval. And now, like I said, we're between space 5 and space 6. We're coming to you all to share with you and to get your thoughts, and then finally going to the Arlington County Board to ask them for action to move forward with detailed design and implementation. So we are hoping to go to them for their July meeting on either the 15th or the 18th. So I'm going to give you sort of like a quick overview of each project and why we chose it and why it's on the list, and then Michelle can walk you through a bit of the proposed design for each. So the first project we're looking at is 14th Street North between North Ohio Street and North McKinley Road in the Highland Park Overly Knolls neighborhood. And you can see there's a little map here that shows you where this project is. So the scope of the project, the kind of improvements that the program is looking to make, is to install continuous sidewalk, upgrade the ADA curb ramps, and create some high visibility marked crossings. We've done staff especially has led a lot of public engagement, as they always do, and very sort of targeted public engagement for each project, which included a web page, online feedback form, flyers, meeting on site, lots of different stuff. So the reason that this project, one of the reasons why this project is here is because it is fourth on the list of the more than 100 projects that we have due to a lot of different issues there. So the proposed scope for where we are right now would put this project at around $587,000. So I will turn it over to you, Michelle, to walk through what the design looks like.
Before we get to, I will
right.
do that, but we have a few slides or photos to share just to give a sense of the existing conditions. This is from Ohio looking towards McKinley. There is some sidewalk. We're going to pick up from this section of sidewalk and build on the north side of the street, which is the left side of the left picture. And this picture on the right is the other end of the project area where the sidewalk will be on the right side. So building on the north side of the street intentionally. So there are utility poles and street lights. The utility poles are actually on both sides of the street. So these are some of the existing constraints, but also trying to work around a stand of mature trees that are we chose the north side to avoid them. In order to get the street width that we need and minimize impacts to both the constraints of the utility poles, the street lights, the mature trees, and people's frontage, we are looking to remove some amount of parking on the street. It has been a very thoughtful process where the parking is not all being removed on one side so that there is a bit of a chicane movement down the street in the clear width. And we did a fair bit of investigation work to try and remove the parking where the impact would be the least. And in most cases, that was the north side of the street where the off-street parking driveway space was much larger and the number of dwellings properties was far fewer. Additionally, there are some properties on the south side of the street that have no off-street parking. So we ensured that the parking wasn't being removed in front of those properties. Additionally, to highlight that we're looking to build out 2 new curb extensions at McKinley Road to try and slow the turning movements, both on to this block of street, but also going from the street onto northbound on McKinley. And then again, picking up with a recent project on Ohio Street. I think that's all I have for right now. Did I miss anything, Elisa?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You can kind of see here where the parking spots are proposed to be. So we'll go through all of these, then we can answer any of your questions.
Yeah, and I should have said the most basic, which is that it's the proposed sidewalk is 5 feet with a 2.5 foot utility strip. And the total curb to curb street width that's proposed is in the range of 32 feet.
So that is the first project. The second project we have for you is 8th Road South between South Dinwiddie Street and South Greenbrier Street. This is in the Arlington Mill neighborhood, and you can see the little map. It's kind of behind the Arlington Mill Community Center off Columbia Pike. So this project is on our list, tied for 6th with 46 points, largely because of crashes with injuries and then high traffic volumes. And so we're looking at here installing new curb extensions and accessible curb ramps, making some marked crossings and improving the signage overall. Again, a lot of public engagement, website, online feedback form, flyers. We did a virtual capital project open house, so it's been shared extensively. And the initial design is proposed to cost $478,000 at this point. So that gives you kind of an overview. And then I guess the next slide, Michelle, for the pictures.
Never gets old forgetting to turn your mic back on. In this case, we're looking at two intersections we're focusing our efforts on. They, in the case of Dickerson, it's just a very large intersection with excessive crossing distances on a relatively high volume neighborhood street. So we'll be looking to shorten that crossing distance in both directions at 8th and Dickerson with upgraded accessible curb ramps. The picture on the right is the intersection of Emerson and 8th Road. You cannot see it, but there are actually two curb ramps on the right side of the picture, but they're blocked by parked cars. Those two curb ramps do not have a typical geometry between the receiving curb ramps and the other side of the street. So, excuse me, this design is looking to replace those two curb ramps and improve the geometry with a single curb ramp that's in a more visible location, which I can show you in the next slide. So again, this is the intersection with Dickerson, where there'll be curb extensions into 8th Road to neck down the road through the intersection. The amount of reduction in the crossing on Dickerson is less because it's a narrower street. There are 8 curb ramps with detectable warning strips, all the usual good stuff. The Emerson intersection to the south, you can see where we're removing 2 curb ramps that are in inopportune locations. I think they were added sort of as part of street repaving and probably best available option at the time without a capital project. We will be straightening the crossing and locating it just one in the most visible location. And there may be opportunities to, I know we got some feedback about whether or not that we can put in a curb extension on both sides. These are very preliminary, about approaching the 15%. So our cost estimates are high level, as are the designs so far.
All right, and then the last project for tonight is South Irving Street. So this is an entire corridor of projects that has been broken into 3 different segments. And so these 3 different segments were all individually nominated. And so we have already looked at segment B, and it is a funded capital project that you all, I believe, saw during our last funding round. And then segment C is kind of on hold for now, looking at future improvements. So tonight we're talking about segment A, which is South Irving between 2nd Road South and 6th Street. And so this is in Arlington Heights neighborhood. So this project has been on our list because it's ranked number 2, second on the list. And so because there's obstructed and narrow or narrow sidewalks, crashes, speeding issues, and relatively high volumes of traffic. And so what the project's going to look to do is replace Carlisle lights located in the sidewalk that are obstructing the sidewalk into curb extensions, and then make accessible curb ramps. And of course, again, lots of public engagement here, including attending the Civic Association meeting, a block meeting on site, and the other forms of communication that Michelle and the team did. And so final thing before I turn over to Michelle is that the cost estimate for this, as she said, rough and early, but is about $522,000. So let's see those photos.
So this section of Irving, the utility poles are on the east side of the street and the street lights are on the west side of the street. We have elected to improve the sidewalk on the west side of the street because that connects to the sidewalk project that we will be constructing for the block to the south. So this provides an additional fully accessible walk route connecting the two school campuses in the Arlington Heights community, with the TJ Fleet campus to the north and the Montessori Career Center campus to the south. This will provide a fully accessible route, at least on the west side of the street. The obstructions in the sidewalk are comically bad, with, as I said, streetlights, utility poles, and we do not, I included the picture to the right to indicate or to demonstrate that we do not have right of way behind the sidewalk. So we don't have the option of relocating the streetlights into the green space on the other side of the sidewalk. We will be having to create a space for them. So this design, which will come at the expense of only 6 on-street parking spaces in the 3-block stretch, will relocate the Carlisle streetlights, which will be upgraded with modern ones or latest standard, into these curb extensions. So the curb extensions, which are I know it's a different design or a little bit different presentation. That pink magenta color indicates concrete. So you can see where the curb and the driveway aprons and the sidewalk are located. The green indicates sod. And then which, should also help some with some of stormwater infiltration, some. And then the orange strips show the detectable warning strips at each of the curb ramps. This may not be the final alignment of these curb ramps. This will go into detailed design once we get through the board. And at that point, the exact curb ramp selection and orientation will be chosen. I want to also highlight that although the curb extensions that we would be building to facilitate removing the obstructions are in the parking lane. Therefore, the travel way does not change. So we don't have any conflict over street width and fire code in this case. However, we do expect and hope that there will be some traffic calming benefit from the appearance of narrowing of the road in those locations. Again, the curb extensions are in the parking lane, but as you go and the curb line meanders some, we think that this could have some traffic calming benefit. In addition to the fact that a portion of this project area is in a new school slow zone. So there will be speed monitoring that will continue through both efforts in tandem in the future. I think that, and I forgot about my funny little graphics, but we did test 2 different designs, one to put cobras instead on the existing utility poles and just remove the Carlisle streetlights entirely. That was not popular in the neighborhood. So we are 100% listening to the neighborhood, and they're very high priority to maintain the aesthetic of the Carlisle streetlights.
All right, so to wrap us up, again, we're here. TC is here at this juncture of the process. And so we'd love to take any questions that you have. And yeah, thank you so much for sticking with us.
Great. Thank you for an excellent presentation. Commissioners, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and raise your physical hand or your virtual hand if you're on Teams. And I will just kick things off with a couple comments. Always supportive of NCSC projects. Great. I love this program. Great to see you here. And able to actually fund multiple capital projects. It's always been a fight to get you all capital money. As far as some individual details, I'm supportive of all 3 of these projects. I really like the use of alternate side parking to create chicanes on that first project. On the Irving Street project, I'm a little concerned by the weirdness of how the sidewalk ramps are shown at 3rd Street and 5th Street. It really seems like a tricky thing to navigate, maybe for a child on a bike, which I know there are certainly plenty of kids biking to school who are only feeling comfortable on the sidewalks, not in the street. So we'd really like to see that smoothed out and some more attention paid there to the pedestrian experience, getting down that greatly improved otherwise sidewalk that will no longer have stuff in the middle of it. I think my daughter will be jazzed. She often walks down Irving coming home from Fleet. So that will be a quality of life improvement for her. And then on 8th Road, I want to join, I think, the chorus of other people you have heard about the need for those curb extensions to go further. I really think Emerson Road needs curb extensions, not just 8th Road. In my opinion, there's no reason for the crossing distance on any of these tiny neighborhood streets to be more than about 20 or 22 feet. If a car could be taking up 7 feet, then a curb extension should come out, at least 7 feet. 20 or 22 feet is enough room for 2 cars to pass each other, no problem, going back and forth. That should be all a pedestrian has to cross, in my opinion. And I'm seeing much bigger numbers at these crosswalks in concept plan view, at least. It looks like, some 30-foot crossings and that sort of thing. If there's particular reasons for that, I'd love to hear it. But otherwise, my feedback is a lot of people will look at a curb extension and say, like, we're not doing very much. So let's do as much as we can with those curb extensions, I think is my thinking. Other commissioners, thoughts, comments, questions? Commissioner Theo.
Yes, just wanted to second about as many extensions of additional curb extensions as possible, even on the low traffic side streets. I know that's been a big thing that I've noticed, even just walking around neighborhoods, is how the curb extensions could greatly benefit just even the low traffic areas. And one question, really just for my own edification, my own education. So with South Irving, the segment C is covered by RPP. Just for my own education, how does that factor into deciding how street parking is rearranged?
Sorry, for South Irving?
Correct, for South Irving.
Oh, we're not looking at segment C right now. It is still on our list. We did sort of review the 3 on a sort of high level view for parking analysis, but segment C could be a future project. I do know that this neighborhood had the Water Streets Bureau's contractor that was improving the uneven concrete, and they're doing some concrete repair work. I believe that already took place. So hopefully the condition, at least for the concrete, the status of the existing concrete might be improved since this was nominated, but segment C does have complete sidewalk on both sides of the street.
Thank you.
You may see us again for segment C, though.
Anybody else? All right, seeing no other hands, then I will move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the County Board approve the 3 neighborhood complete streets capital projects for funding and construction as presented before us today. Is there a second?
Second.
Theo, seconds. Any discussion of the motion? All right, then we will go to a vote and we will figure out if I know who is here or not. Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan, did he manage to make it into the virtual meeting? Nope. Probably not appropriate to vote, having just entered the meeting now. Commissioner Lantelme, I know you made it in.
Yeah, I made it finally. Yes, I vote in favor. Aye.
Commissioner Locker, come on virtually. Nope. I know Commissioner Ludlow was not going to be here. Commissioner Muradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
Did Commissioner Terry make it in virtually? Nope. And then I will also vote yes. That passes unanimously 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. Stafford.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the future of outdoor dining, the food study with staff member Brett Wallace.
Good evening, everybody. Just want to confirm quickly, you can see my slides. Can you hear me okay?
Sure thing.
Okay, let me go ahead and get started then. So good evening, everybody. My name is Brett Wallace. I'm with the Planning Division. I'm here this evening to provide an update on the future of outdoor dining study. Staff was presented to the Transportation Commission last month for information, and so we're here this evening for action. Let me see if I can go to full screen mode here. Okay, good. Okay, so just briefly going over the study schedule, we launched the study last fall when the county manager removed the emergency order. We started phase 1 of the study where we were doing a lot of information gathering, looking at the temporary outdoor seating areas that were established over the pandemic, or the TOSAs, looking at existing policies. We also conducted research on other communities nearby and across the country. We conducted some community engagement events last fall where we received quite a bit of responses, and we hosted a couple of virtual roundtable events. Then we moved into phase 2. We continued to do additional information gathering and community review, and looked at some of the findings from phase 1 to really help inform and develop some of the draft framework and recommendations that you're going to see this evening. We're currently in the final phase 3 of the project, where we're looking at zoning ordinance text amendments and updates to outdoor cafe guidelines. We presented to the county board in June for the request to advertise. They authorized advertisement for both planning commission and county board hearings in July. And just to note, the temporary outdoor seating program, or the TOSA program, will be ending on August 15th, which marks the end of the continuity of governance ordinance. So just a quick overview on the food study purpose and goals. Again, we were looking at the which aspects of the TOSA program could fit into Arlington's framework for a permanent outdoor cafe program. We're also looking at informing other changes to how we review and manage outdoor cafes in both private and public spaces. And we want to create a clear pathway forward for the current TOSA permit holders and restaurants looking to transition to the more permanent outdoor cafe program. And so early on in the study, staff developed some overarching study themes listed on the bottom of the slide here. The first being restaurants as a public good, understanding that restaurants and outdoor cafes really contribute to an active streetscape and street life. Looking at restaurant recovery and resiliency, on how we can support flexible options for outdoor seating to help restaurants bounce back from any losses that occurred over the pandemic. And then looking at outdoor cafes as different places and spaces. Not every outdoor cafe is alike. They all fit within different contexts, and so we need to consider those as well. But just real briefly, as a refresher, some of the existing zoning ordinance regulations and guidance for outdoor cafes. So currently, the current approval process for outdoor cafes, pre-pandemic as well, as identified in the guidelines for outdoor cafes from 2013. Outdoor cafes on private property currently can be reviewed administratively and approved by the zoning administrator. And those outdoor cafes within the public rights of way or public spaces currently require a use permit approval by the county board. Some applicable policies and regulations for outdoor cafes are listed here, including the guidelines, the zoning ordinance, the Arlington County Retail Plan supports outdoor cafes, the Master Transportation Plan pedestrian element with regard to clear sidewalks, for example. The Public Spaces Master Plan also encourages outdoor cafes when thought of early on in the design and planning process for public spaces. And of course, on the right, we've got statewide building code, fire prevention code, the Virginia ABC for alcohol service in outdoor cafes. And we have additional guidance on tents and heaters and the encroachment ordinance within the public right of way that I'll speak about in a moment. So again, another quick refresher on the temporary outdoor seating areas, or the TOSAs. These were established in 2020 to help restaurants during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was at a time when dining inside of a restaurant was not an option, and so the only option was outdoor dining. So staff developed some flexible design and operational guidelines. We developed an online submission process with an interdepartmental team of staff. The TOSAs were approved by the county manager through the continuity of governance ordinance. Currently today, we have approximately 100 TOSAs that are still in operation, both on public and private property. And again, just noting that those TOSAs will expire on August the 15th. This slide just shows some examples of both outdoor cafes and TOSAs throughout the county. I think some of these examples probably clearly show some of the cafe creep with regard to clear sidewalks and creating congestion on the sidewalk, which is a concern that we heard through the process. Some other examples of TOSAs in private parking spaces. These are off-street surface parking lots that have been converted into outdoor dining patio spaces. And then we also have examples of TOSAs that have encompass the entire sidewalk, like you see on the bottom of the slide. And our transportation staff accommodated these TOSAs by installing these wheel stops and flexible bollards to permit pedestrian circulation in the street to circulate around some of these TOSAs. So in terms of the phase one engagement, what we heard, this is an overview of the community priorities and considerations with the TOSAs. In general, we heard a lot of support for local businesses, the enjoyment of outdoor dining, providing safe, accessible pedestrian circulation was paramount. We heard support for reduced parking, for expanded outdoor dining options. But above all, we heard the need to streamline the review process to make things easier for restaurants going forward. Just going to present the proposed zoning ordinance amendments. But first, I just wanted to note the recommended framework, some of the key elements. There are 3 items. The first being the zoning ordinance amendments. Staff is recommending permitting outdoor seating in public spaces administratively reviewed by the zoning administrator. This is a big change that we're recommending because currently outdoor cafes in the public space are reviewed by the county board by use permit. This can take a minimum of 3 months and cost a minimum of $2,000 or even more. And it's a lot of time and resources for both the staff and the applicant. So we see this as a improvement. We're also recommending the ability for the county board to modify parking requirements for outdoor dining that's located on required parking spaces that are required by the zoning ordinance. I just want to make a quick note that that's only on the required parking spaces for the indoor portion of the restaurant. If there is excess parking above what's required by the zoning ordinance, those type of outdoor cafes could be approved administratively. So the use permit is only recommended for those on the required zoning parking spaces. And then we have other amendments to further the study goals and recommendations. The second item is a subject of a separate staff report that's being led by the Department of Environmental Services Real Estate Bureau. It is the encroachment ordinance and outdoor cafe license. This will be a new chapter of the county code with an administrative process to review encroachments into the public space. and requirements for an outdoor cafe license, application, and fee. And these two items were subjects of the June request to advertise at the county board, and they'll be subjects of the July county board meeting. The third item is an administrative document that requires no county board action. It's the update to the outdoor cafe guidelines that was last updated in 2013. And this is really to serve as a resource document for applicants with information on the application and permit process, guidance for clear sidewalks, pedestrian safety, and other relevant fire and building code information. So this summary table here essentially outlines staff's recommendations for both the existing and the proposed process for outdoor cafes. So currently we have 3 different typologies of outdoor cafes. The first being on private property that's unencumbered by any kind of public access easements. So currently today, those are reviewed administratively by the zoning administrator. Staff is recommending to carry that forward to allow those cases to also be approved administratively on private property. The second typology are outdoor cafes within public rights of way. Again, I mentioned currently those are reviewed by the county board by use permit. Staff is recommending administrative review of those outdoor cafes that are in the public right of way. And then the third type is the privately owned public spaces, or POPs. Those currently are reviewed by the county board by use permit, and our staff is recommending to continue that practice to review any outdoor cafes and plazas and courtyards and things, public spaces by use permit. So again, summarizing the proposed zoning amendments, text changes to several articles in the zoning ordinance, including Article 12 for outdoor cafes to reflect the proposed changes for the approval process for the 3 different types that are listed here. Again, private property, use of required parking spaces by use permit, public property, there'll be a requirement for an outdoor cafe license as part of the new chapter 70 of the code. These cafes also need to meet the zoning ordinance use standards. There'll be a clear sidewalk dimension, a minimum width of 6 feet unless otherwise approved by site plan or use permit. If there's a wider sidewalk clearance, then that will need to be met. The location in front of the restaurant, and then sound and entertainment not permitted in outdoor cafes that are adjacent to residential districts. And then again, for the privately owned public spaces, a use permit required and also a requirement for an outdoor cafe license. Additional text changes to Articles 6, 7, and 8, mainly to the use tables in the commercial and industrial districts. And again, these are editorial changes to reflect changes for the approval process. Some text changes to Article 14 for parking, mainly to resolve any regulatory conflicts with allowing outdoor cafes and off-street parking spaces. And then the use permit requirement for outdoor cafes that are again located on required parking spaces. And then finally, Article 18, staff is recommending a new definition for public space that's privately owned. This is a new definition to distinguish the POPs from the other public easement areas, such as sidewalks. And again, a requirement for a use permit for those cases. So just quickly, I mentioned the new chapter of the county code, chapter 70, encroachment into public spaces. Again, this is an effort that's being led by the Real Estate Bureau. The recommendations are coming forward in July alongside of the recommendations for the food study. But kind of backing up to the Arlington County Retail Plan, there was an item in the action plan that encourages administrative license process to use the public right-of-way. So this is finally come to fruition and bringing it to the board in a few weeks. The new chapter of the county code, again, subject to another staff report, will again provide a license for the private outdoor cafe use of any public space. It's an administrative process for applications, approvals, and renewals. There will be an application fee plus an annual license fee that's based on the cafe square footage. And currently, staff is recommending the fees will be determined in the fiscal year 25 budget, July of next year. And again, this outdoor cafe license would be in addition to any other requirements for cafes under the zoning ordinance. And again, these recommendations are coming forward with the food study. So staff has been busy over the past month and a half, attending and presenting at the committees listed here. We've met with the zoning committee twice. We met with the Transportation Commission late May. We have presented to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Chamber of Commerce several times, Economic Development, and again, the County Board requests to advertise in June, and Park and Recreation Commission in June as well. And so we're here this evening, and we, of course, will be presenting at the Planning Commission a week from today on the 6th of July before going to the County Board for action on the zoning ordinance amendments and the encroachment ordinance. We are anticipating some activity post the County Board meeting in July, including some in-person direct engagement with the restaurants that currently have TOSAs. Looking at those interested restaurants to file whatever pertinent applications by August the 15th, which is the end of the continuity of governance ordinance. And then we're creating an interdepartmental staff team to review those applications with an estimated time frame of 90 to 120 days, with decisions on any administrative or use permit applications to occur later this year. So the county manager recommendation, I'm not going to read all this, but just is mainly to adopt the proposed amendments to Articles 6, 7, 8, 12, 14, and 18 of the Arlington County zoning ordinance to permit outdoor cafes in the public right-of-way by administrative review and other items listed here and noted in the staff report. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Commissioners, go ahead and throw your hand up, either physical or virtual. If you have questions on this, I definitely do. And I would like to go ahead and thank the Pedestrian Advisory Committee for sending us a letter on this, highlighting a number of issues we either missed at RTA or did not give sufficient air to at RTA. So I want to jump into those now. I think I missed this at RTA because the word parking is mentioned about 1 billion times in this board report, but it appears that it is all related to parking, cafes on private parking, or cafes that remove parking spaces that would be required by the zoning ordinance for their parking ratio. Does this permit cafes in on-street public parking?
What?
Currently does not, no.
Yeah, I missed that first time around. So any administratively approved cafe under this ordinance, the only place it can come from is sidewalk, basically, if it's on public
Correct.
land.
Correct, or in privately owned public spaces as well.
Right. My next question is the 6-foot clear width that's required to be maintained. It is interesting to me that it is just 6 feet across the entire county. We have, all sorts of planning documents in Arlington that get very specific about what the appropriate sidewalk width is on pretty much every block in every planning corridor. Some of them we say need to be 16, and some 12, and some 10, and some 8, and some 6. How is it that what's the rationale behind 6 foot being the correct clear width county-wide in places where there are going to be cafes?
Yeah, I can start, and then if Bridget's able to chime in as well, I welcome that, because she's been serving on the core team. So the MTP, as you probably already know, states that 6 foot is the minimum required clear path distance within commercial mixed-use zones or high-density areas. But the MTP also states that wider sidewalk widths may be recommended by site plan or sector plans. The design guidelines that I mentioned that were last updated in 2013 also reference the MTP and sector plans. And staff is requiring more sidewalk clear widths on site plan projects that have site plan approvals. So if a site plan has an approval of an 8-foot clear sidewalk, that will need to be maintained for outdoor cafes. And any applicant who wishes to change that would need to get a site plan amendment. So we do want to uphold any site plan conditions and approvals for clear sidewalk widths. And so staff is currently not proposing any more than the 6-foot clear minimum for those properties that are developed by right and not yet subject to a site plan approval.
And I'd also like to add that we also had the benefit of the pilot, I'm calling it, since the TOSAs were enacted, and we used 6 foot as a minimum there too, unless site plans advised otherwise.
So 6 foot is the minimum if you're a by right building or a site plan that does not reference a specific clear width in the site plan conditions.
That is correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Other commissioner questions or comments?
Okay.
Commissioner Maradovic, go ahead.
Yeah, I have. I share some of those concerns that the pedestrian advisory committee wrote up, because everything seems to be done at the expense of pedestrians and the sidewalk. And as Chairman Slatt mentioned, there's a lot of talk about parking. We look at some of these, how long it's going to take to process these requests, 90 to 120 days. Why don't we just streamline it even more? If businesses want to put the tables on their parking spots or private parking spots, let them do that. We keep running into the issue of parking minimums, and it always turns out to be a complication, especially in areas that are predominantly pedestrian heavy anyway, and already dense. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Lantelme, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. When I was president of Lime Village Civic Association, one of the issues that kept coming up was something that was raised by pedestrian advisory, and that's the table creep, which the tables would gradually move further and further into the right-of-way, pedestrian right-of-way, beyond what was otherwise allowed. And enforcement is spotty at best for something like that. Is there some way we can better ensure that the tables stay where they need to be and they don't end up blocking pedestrian right away, especially in the metro corridors where there really is a lot of pedestrian traffic? And it's sometimes hard to get by. And I'm totally supporting the idea of the outdoor dining, because that's really great for Clarendon, for example. It's wonderful, but that creep of the tables and chairs is a valid issue, and there has to be some way we can maybe better deal with that. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I can appreciate the Pedestrian Advisory Committee's letter. I also understand some of the concerns about the width and the access, but I counter, and I don't necessarily agree with the contents of the letter, particularly because I think we want to progress to be more outdoor community and society. I think the TOSAs and the outdoor dining are a good move and direction for where we want to head as a whole. And although they may impede some rights of way, at times that could also then lead to a potential future push for reassessment of space or roadways and parking. So just that to add.
Thank you, Commissioner Nolan. Follow up to my earlier question, why doesn't this permit cafes in on-street parking?
So currently, we do have a parklet program that you're aware of. Those can take up a maximum of 2 parking spaces. However, those parklets need to remain open to the public and cannot be used for private use. In our consultations with the county attorney's office, we understand there's underlying street easements that may preclude the private use of the public space by easement language. So there's some legal hurdles we've identified early on in the process, because I know a lot of other cities, the district, I was just in New York this past weekend and they're all over the place. We know a lot of cities are doing it. It's something that I think we'll need to just look at further as part of a future study, but currently we've been told that there's some legal hurdles in the way. But it's something certainly that I think we want to continue to think about and look for, as part of the future study.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Lantelmi, do you have another thing, or is that your hand just still up from earlier?
Sorry, I'll take it down.
No worries. I think next I want to talk about the encroachment ordinance a bit. Partly because as far as I can tell, we didn't get any briefing information on it. So I just went and found it in the RTA from the county board meeting in June. And is there somebody on who can talk to details in the encroachment ordinance if I have detailed questions?
Try my best, but I don't know if there's anybody. Mr. Haluski, I don't know if he's still on the call, but he may be able to answer questions if he's available, but I can try my best.
It looks to me like there are certain encroachments that don't require any sort of approval. There are certain encroachments that require this administrative cafe license, and then everything else basically requires an encroachment ordinance, which some of us have become familiar with in the past as how we've done encroachments up till now. Is that relatively accurate?
So currently, as you probably know, the county board reviews ordinances of encroachment for things like steps and stoops and awnings and balconies that overhang or extend into the public right of way. Those are recommended to be moved to this administrative process. And then, as I mentioned, also for the outdoor cafes, for those in the public right of way, those would need to obtain an outdoor cafe license for the operation of those cafes that are in the public right of way.
Sorry, without having had this in advance, it's very hard to ask reasonable questions. I'm sure I'm just missing something here, but it seems to indicate that, for instance, stairs can encroach into the public sidewalk as long as they don't extend from the building face more than 4 feet and they maintain 5 feet between the stairs and the back of curb. Is there additional requirements beyond that I'm not seeing in here? Because that's not even a 6 foot clear width, right? That's 5 feet between the back of curb and the stairs.
I'm looking at the ordinance document myself. So point taken. We can follow up when I consult with the real estate team.
Commissioner Theo, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, just a question for you for Chair Slot. What would be the best way for us to strongly recommend to the county board and to staff to include public parking spaces in this food study? I guess in the Chapter 70 probably amendments. Would it be as an amendment to the proposed amendment?
Right, so usually we would start with the county manager's recommendation, and then usually when we recommend things other than the county manager's recommendation, we add those as amendments. Or from time to time, we just recommend something completely different than the county manager's recommendation. For instance, sometimes we recommend deferral of a site plan rather than approval of the site plan, just straight up.
Understood. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, let me take a look here. All right, I think I'm ready to make a motion then. I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt, well, actually, before I move, quick question, Mr. Wallace. The CM recommendation that's up here does not say anything about the encroachment ordinance, is that correct?
Correct. The two of them were subjects for the request to advertise. But it was determined that the encroachment ordinance did not need to go to the planning commission, only to the county board for adoption in July. So the two items will be presented together, like back to back at the July county board meeting, but it's a separate staff report and a separate subject on the agenda.
But is it also accurate to say that implementation of the outdoor cafes, things that are outlined here in the county manager's recommendation, implementing them without the encroachment ordinance would not be possible?
That's correct.
Yeah. Next question, before I make another motion. It sounds like from your timeline that we're going to have a gap here where these are going to be approved, but you're not going to be able to turn around approvals of these cafes before the continuity of government ordinance ends, and therefore their existing TOSAs are not legalized by that. Is that accurate?
So currently we're developing, we'll be working on following the July meeting, implementation framework and the infrastructure needed in place to proceed with intake and application submissions, reviews and approval. That's something that we're considering to include as an additional recommendation as part of the county board report in July to have the county board authorize the manager to direct staff to develop an implementation framework by a date certain, so that we can work with restaurants starting in July 15th to pull together whatever necessary application materials they need to prepare. And we're considering doing one-on-one consultations. So we really want to work with the restaurants to bring their TOSAs or their outdoor cafes into compliance with the new regulations. So we are looking at an implementation framework at a date certain, as I mentioned, in that 90 to 120 days after the July 15th meeting.
Sorry to just kind of restate my question, but I just want to be really clear on this. So, but they're not all going to be taken care of by the end of the continuity ordinance. Like, that's not 120 days from now.
Want to encourage interested applicants to get their applications in. Each case is unique. Some may have a use permit, some may be a site plan, some may have just been operating as a TOSA. And so we want to work with each one of them to get the application process going. In which case we would not be actively enforcing the TOSAs during that process. If applicants were making a good faith effort to proceed to bring their TOSA into compliance.
All right. This is probably not the most useful thing, but it's all I can bring myself to do at this point. I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board defer adoption of the proposed amendments to Article 6, 7, 8, 12, 14, and 18 of the Arlington County zoning ordinance to permit outdoor cafes in the public rights of way by administrative review, and furthermore to defer approval of the new administrative encroachment ordinance.
Seconded.
All right. I don't think this is actually going to accomplish much because of the deadline before us, but I don't think this is ready. I have not seen, I think I have serious concerns about the encroachment ordinance in relation to things that have absolutely nothing to do with sidewalk cafes. I hate that we've gotten to this point where all cafes in the public right of way come exclusively from the pedestrian space. And I hate that we have not come up with an approach that brings some more nuance to the required clear width. And that there still doesn't seem a concrete way forward to actually enforce that clear width in the first place. I think I'm probably to the point where I would go forward with 6 foot clear width if I had any faith that it was going to be proactively enforced with some sort of regularity. But I've not heard anything in this conversation that leads me to believe that that's going to change, and it would be a change. That's not how it is now. Like, it doesn't seem that hard. It seems like a single person, could, there aren't that many of them. It's not a big county, could walk them in the evening when people are eating and deal with this, one person. But anyway, so that's where I am. I, again, am not expecting it to have a whole lot of weight, given that staff has chosen to wait until a very stark August 15th deadline we have essentially imposed upon ourselves. Nobody wants to go out there and tell the restaurants that they have to take their TOSAs down. But I have real concerns about passing this right now, and I'm definitely not prepared to recommend approval of it at this point. So that is why I have moved deferral. Would anyone else like to discuss the motion? Commissioner Yeri.
And I will also add that I'm deeply skeptical that if the matter or the legal issues surrounding whether or not we can put cafe seating in the streets, if it isn't resolved here, that it will be resolved anytime soon. Given my experience with previous plans, these things do not just get updated easily. If the question isn't resolved here, it may be years or a very long time before it's resolved. Or any plan is updated to resolve it.
Anyone else? Commissioner Coleman, I see your light's on, but I don't know if that's okay. Anybody online? I'm not seeing virtual hands. All right.
I got something to say.
Oh, Commissioner Lantelmi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Chair Slat's analysis of this. I'm going to vote to move forward with it simply because we really need to move forward. I don't want to put any of our restaurants in a bind. That said, I think it is absolutely appropriate that we do a further study of this to look at all those issues that Chair Slat has raised. Whether we do a deferral or an amendment saying that we recommend further study for X, Y, and Z, it has to be done, because this, as it is, I see it as basically just an emergency interim to make sure that our restaurants are not going to be disadvantaged, and they can continue in operation. But the issues that Chair Slot has raised are absolutely valid, and I do concur with those, even though I will vote to move ahead with this. Thank you.
Last call, hands. All right. So this motion before us is to defer, to be very clear. I'm making that clear because that's not usually where we're at. All right, Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan, did he make it on virtually?
Yes. Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Nay.
Nay. Commissioner Locker, did she make it on virtually? Okay. Commissioner Moradovic?
Aye.
Commissioner Yuri?
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon?
Nay.
Commissioner Theo?
Aye.
Did Commissioner Terry make it on virtually?
Yes, and I'm an aye.
Aye. Okay. And then I too will vote yes. So that motion recommending that the county board defer passes 7-2. Thank you very much to staff for the presentation.
Next on the agenda is the ARVA. And staff member Jane Kim will introduce the applicant.
Hi, it's been a while. We have the applicant for ARVA. I believe Mr. Matthew Roberts is representing their team, so I'll let them get going with their presentation.
Wonderful. So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'm Matt Roberts with the Hirschler Law Firm, here tonight on behalf of the applicant, joined tonight by Jake Hermley from Gore of Slade, as well as Ashton Allen from Studios Architecture on the team. We're very happy to be here and to talk through our application. Ashton, are you able to share the presentation for us?
I will begin sharing now.
Great. Wonderful. Next slide, please, Ashton. Very quickly, I'm sure you all are pretty familiar with the site, but if you're not, we're discussing the redevelopment of the Days Inn Hotel located at the intersection of North Pershing Drive and Arlington Boulevard. Really sort of the last component of the gateway into the Lion Park neighborhood. This has sort of been on the county's books for some time in one form or fashion, and ultimately happy to be seeing the redevelopment go forward. Next slide, please, Ashton. So just a bit of history on the site. It's sort of unique. The existing hotel was actually built between 1955 and the 1960s. It's gone through various iterations and flags over time, but originally developed as the ARVA Hotel. It's a 128-unit structure, and again, trying to bring back some of this history ultimately into the design of the building, which Ashton will touch on. Next slide, please. In July 2021, the county board saw fit to approve a special GLUF study for this project, really giving us a good guide and some key recommendations to follow for the site redevelopment. Overall, though, the study looked for mixed-use development to complete that gateway and guidance, sort of big ticket items in terms of new open space, both in terms of transforming what is essentially a concrete area today on the east side of the site into the extension of the Arlington Boulevard Trail, inclusion of a new on-site park, and also completing that gateway into the neighborhood in a couple different senses, both architecturally, making sure that the density is tapering directly into the neighborhood, also adding new site and access connections that don't exist today so that future residents and existing residents will be able to access the trail that we'll be developing. And again, last but not least, embracing some of that site history. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Ashton. There we go. So are very, very happy with the application and the way it's been turning out. The application ultimately tracks the study in nearly every respect. What we'll be bringing forward is a mixed-use residential and retail project, approximately 251 units on site, a mix of various size bedrooms, which we'll talk about in a second, and just under 3,000 square feet of retail or retail equivalent space. Appropriate and important for this commission in particular, we do plan to park the residential units at 0.8 spaces per unit and the retail at 1 per 580. Next slide, please, Ashton. So there's always a question in every 4.1 application about how you get to what you want to design and what you want to build. And this application, with the benefit of the special GLUP study, is going to be delivering on a number of community benefits. That includes, as I mentioned, the extension of the Arlington Boulevard Trail south along North Pershing Drive, and that includes micromobility stations and other, access and trails along that area. We'll also be doing off-site protected bike lanes, both on the north and south side of North Pershing Drive. Those don't exist today, and they weren't developed when the building across the street from us was developed several years ago. In addition to that, there will be about a 10,000 square foot park that will be on site with pedestrian access through that. That is ultimately going to get programmed through a separate process if the board sees fit to approve this application. But in addition to all of that, new site connections such as the proposed Muse, which Ashton will talk about, and also on-site affordable dwelling units and LEED Gold certification, among many other things. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashton to walk you all around the site.
Thanks, Matt. I'm Ashton Allen with Studios Architecture, and I'm going to walk through the architecture and the siting of the building very quickly. Looking forward to hearing comments and further discussion. This is an image from the special GLUP study floating over the corner of Arlington Boulevard and Pershing Drive. And here you could see some of the historic features that Matt had mentioned at the corner in white, as well as some of the basic massing that we're very pleased to have developed and moved forward. This is a rendering from that similar location, pulled in a little bit, but Arlington Boulevard is on the left and Pershing Drive sliding along the right, where you can see kind of covered in some text one of the two newly improved hopefully protected bike lanes, pending coordination with the fire department. The architecture itself is moving that density toward Arlington Boulevard and fundamentally transforms the site from the image that you saw earlier, which was a very automotive-focused architecture, building sitting in a surface of asphalt, to a much denser use that's really focused on a building situated within landscape and really pulls that transformation or transportation infrastructure interior to the site and really does a focus on multimodal and pedestrian activity. This is pulling in a little bit to the corner of Pershing and Arlington Boulevard, where some of these historic features will be enhanced and celebrated. Also at that corner, we're going to be looking to integrate micro-mobility stations as per suggested by the GLUP. We look forward to continuing to develop what these are as the plan continues to go forward, but it's certainly a part of the plan and at that highly intensive intersection where the trail that Matt mentioned is going to be transformed from the asphalt paving to a new multimodal trail that connects north to south. In this view, there's a little key at the top. We have transitioned over to Pershing Drive looking directly south. You see kind of through the building in a vehicular pass-through, which is where all the circulation for the site works. We are reducing the number of curb cuts on Pershing Drive from about 5 to 1, where really it's focusing that vehicular transformation happening on the spot with a drop off and pieces internal to the site managing the vehicular transformation. This is an image from the GLUP that's floating above North Wayne and Pershing Drive, looking at the public use easement park, which Matt had mentioned, a 10,000 square foot area. And this is a view dropping down to the street, looking across that same area with that public easement park in the foreground, the retail equivalent space at the corner of that public space and low-rise architecture next to it. The park itself will be developed in a separate process, as Matt mentioned, but these are some of the elements within the GLUP that are reflected forward within a lens of biophilia that we're looking forward to continuing to develop with the community through the parks process. As part of the improvements along those streets. These are highlighting essentially the street sections along Pershing Drive on the top of the page, where there's a minimum of a 6-foot clearance for that sidewalk. But as you can see, the only place where that 6-foot clearance exists is where that public park easement pulls up, really maximizing the amount of area that is that palette for the community to develop, whether that area is best served as sidewalk space or best served as green space and park area for the community is where that process is. Then on North Wayne, massive improvement to what is currently a pretty minor pedestrian experience that expands into a 6-foot sidewalk with a full planting edge along here. This is another image from the GLUP that focuses on this low rise and the muse as it cuts through the architecture. This is a 3-dimensional view of that same spot where you're seeing the muse that takes traffic and moves it underneath the building, but continues to pass through for multimodal connection to the trail improvement on Arlington Boulevard. We've now flipped over to floating above Arlington Boulevard, looking more north. Again, this is the image from the GLUP. We've now come closer into the building onto that new improved multi-use trail, transforming the paved area into something that really is ultimately an amenity and transforming the site again from this paving predominant area to really a landscape and pedestrian multimodal area. This is some information on the biophilic features of that, which we are really excited to bring forward and transform this area again into something that speaks more of nature than of hardscape. And as part of the SPRC process, we're proud to have worked with the community to really find a way to push all the parking below grade. And these images kind of show that red line of where the grade is, really providing an apartment interface that has essentially a stoop relationship to the trail and a pedestrian and bike only connection through that muse. Definitely a complicated bit of infrastructure to satisfy that GLUP requirement, but we think it's really going to be an asset. Finally, here we are flipped around on Arlington Boulevard and see that architecture, which is taking some of the inspiration from that sign in these kind of feathered shingled forms as they pull back and satisfying the stepping that was requested in the GLUP, and I think a satisfying architecture. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake to talk a little bit about our transportation process. Jake?
Thanks, Ashton. I'm Jake Herman with Grove Slade. We worked with the team to put together the transportation review for the site. I wanted to start by providing a brief overview of the key transportation elements of this site. It's located at the corner of North Pershing Drive and Arlington Boulevard, with 15 bus stops located within a quarter mile or easy walking distance. The site has connectivity to bike lanes on Pershing Drive and to the Arlington Boulevard Trail located along the eastern edge of the site. The project is proposing several transportation improvements that are consistent with the adopted special GLUP study at the site, including improvements to the Arlington Boulevard Trail, the Muse, and protected bike lanes on Pershing Drive. To highlight the proposed parking, for vehicular parking, the project is proposing 201 residential spaces for a ratio of 0.8 and 6 retail parking spaces. For bikes, there will be 102 secure bike parking spaces in 2 ground level bike parking rooms, one located on the northwest side of the site adjacent to the open space, and one closer to the southeastern corner near the access to the Arlington Boulevard Trail. There will also be 16 short-term bike parking spaces located along the frontage of the site on Pershing Drive. And finally, there will be a transportation management plan, which will include measures to reduce single occupancy vehicle usage on the site, and I'll provide a few more details on that later. Next slide, Ashton. So vehicular access to the site will be provided via 2 driveways, one on North Pershing Drive and one on North Wayne Street. Just to orient you to the figure on the right, North Pershing is at the top of the figure running east-west. North Wayne Street is on the left side of the figure running north-south, and Arlington Boulevard is on the right side running north-south. The driveway at North Pershing Drive is proposed to be right in, right out only, and the driveway at North Wayne Street is proposed to be left in, right out only. The driveways will be connected by an internal street, which will provide access to the ground level loading facilities and the parking. The segment of this internal street located along the southern frontage of the site is the Muse, and that street is intended to accommodate all transportation modes and will include a curbless design and non-traditional paving and streetscape elements. Again, parking, we're proposing 0.8 spaces per unit for residential and 1 per 580 for retail. And there will be 8 EV parking spaces on day 1 with 23 EV ready spaces. Next slide, Ashton. So this slide just provides additional detail on site circulation and truck movements through the site. One thing I wanted to highlight on this slide is that there is a pickup drop-off area located along the internal driveway just south of North Pershing. Ashton, if you don't mind, yes, thank you. Located on the east side of the driveway there. Next slide, please. So the project will include a transportation management plan with measures to reduce single occupancy vehicle usage at the site. I won't go through all of these measures, but this TMP will include all of the typical measures for a residential site plan in Arlington County. Some examples of these measures are designating an on-site transportation coordinator, contributing to Arlington County commuter services, and working with Arlington transportation partners. One thing we wanted to highlight with the on-site facilities is those 2 ground level bike rooms that will provide convenient access to bike parking. And next slide, Ashton. So just to summarize the proposed transportation improvements on this site, there will be protected bike lanes on North Pershing Drive, the new segment of Arlington Boulevard Trail along the eastern edge of the site, additional pedestrian porosity through the site with the Muse, upgraded sidewalks along the perimeter of the site, new open space at the northwest corner of the site, and finally a reduction in the number of curb cuts with reducing from 4 at the existing site down to 2 with the proposed condition. And with that, we'll wrap up our presentation and look forward to answering your questions.
Ms. Kim, do you have further presentation on this?
Yeah, I have a very brief presentation. Perhaps. Just to introduce myself again, Jane Kim from DES Development Services. I actually inherited this project from a retiring colleague, Dennis Sellen, so I'll definitely be relying on the applicant to answer some of the more technical questions you may have. Just a quick overview of the project. You've heard it's the 8-story mixed-use building, and there were several studies prior to the site plan process. There are 3, I think, main modifications requested for additional density, reduced parking ratios for both the residential and retail parking, as well as sign regulations having to do with the historic preservation requirements for the site. I think one element I wanted to touch on was that I believe there are 16 short-term parking spaces on the surface, but hidden from the public right-of-way. I wanted to point those out that, we don't normally allow surface parking, and I think the GLUP strongly suggested that that would not be preferred. But considering the use for these spaces and the fact that they're not visible from the right-of-way, and I believe a pretty good reduction in the initial amount that was proposed, we're comfortable supporting the applicant's proposal for this situation here. Just the red areas are those spaces, and the lay-by is actually not included in this space. It's a little bit north. Key transportation elements that Jake has already discussed. Obviously the trail extension, and then the protected bike lanes on both sides of Pershing, which includes therefore an off-site transportation improvement are pretty key elements. And with the trail, there's additional ADA improvements, landscaping, and trail amenities. I believe there's a bike fix-it hub. So staff recommends, the county manager recommends to adopt the 3 elements that are being proposed by the applicants. I'll of course be here for any questions, and I can leave this slide up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. I was both TC's rep on the special GLUP study that preceded this development, as well as TC's rep on site plan review for this development. So just a little bit of background. I think the applicant has done an absolutely fantastic job, hewing to the letter and the spirit of the special GLUP study. I really commend them on, the adjustments that they have made over the course of site plan review, whether it was, undergrounding some more of that parking, nicely screening what little surface parking remains, so that while it can still retain that convenience of surface, it's not a thing that people need to be seeing from the public realm. Really excited to see the offsite transportation improvement get popped in here so that we have a consistent biking experience on both sides of Pershing. Wasn't necessary, but I think it's a very apt and nicely appropriate way to get some of that bonus density. Always like to see an on-site affordable housing contribution, and this one has a nice one, a pretty sizable one. Really commend the applicant on that. There was a lot of discussion at site plan review and in the special GLUP study about the historical background of this site. There was some really hope that we would save the original sign. The applicant, I think, has made a very compelling case that that is not doable. And I think they've done a great job recreating it and adapting it to fit this building, which looks very different from the original building. So what little differences there are, I think, are marked improvement for their ability to sit on this particular building. And so I will probably end saying that I think the applicant has done a fantastic job on this project, even though it appears that 2 of the things that I wanted the most did not make it into this project, one of which is retail on the plaza, the Trail Plaza there at Pershing and Arlington Boulevard Trail, and 2, it sounds like we got a fix-it station, not a water fountain, and I was pushing for the water fountain. So with that, I will leave it to other commissioners if they have questions or comments on this agenda item. Commissioner Thea.
Yes. Very excited to see the improvements with protected bike lanes on Pershing and the improvements for the Arlington Boulevard Trail. Really love to see that. So thank you. Great job on that, I think. One question. I thought I saw from one of the slides that there's a potential micro mobility station in the median of Pershing Drive. That seemed like an odd location. I don't know if I just misread that in passing, but micro mobility station in the median just seems like an odd spot for one. So I wanted to clarify that. Also, question about the ground level bike rooms. Will those have sufficient space for cargo bikes, which are much larger than standard bikes? And I imagine would really benefit from being at ground level instead of having to take up from a garage.
Well, sure. So just very quickly, I can help answer the first question. All the micromobility would be on site. So it'll either be primarily within that trail extension, probably at that corner in that plaza. That's really where people kind of generated and coming at the site. It's a good place to pick up some micromobility use. So no, not out in the median. I would ask Jake or Ashton to talk a little bit about the bike rooms and the sizing of that.
I can talk about that quickly. I'm pulling up an image of the site plan, if folks can see it, that show the 2 bike rooms. The one that's situated adjacent to the park easement, but is accessed all through space that is not part of that easement, so that the park can be totally freely designed. And as you can start to see in some of the background here, you could see in the submitted drawings, there is significantly more space in this bike room than you would see in a typical bike room. And a lot of that was done with the thought in mind of larger cargo bike equipment and being able to satisfy that in a larger storage. Then the secondary bike room, which is here closer to the trail, is probably this was something that I think was a strong community recommendation, and we thought that there was a good opportunity to provide it to kind of have these two different things. The bike room that's adjacent to the park is really located well for the service area of the building, so that residents can come in through the back door after they come in with their groceries and their kids on their cargo bike, and kind of be able to get back up to their apartment conveniently. So. It's a great question, and it's one that we've talked about in SPRC, and one that we've talked about as a design team. So appreciate it.
Commissioner Lantelmi, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have a question. Along the Muse, on the south end of it against the apartment building, are you planning to have fences or leave that open?
So at this point, we are, there's a fence there today. There's landscape that's being added there within a zone. I don't think explicitly we have added a fence back in, but I'll be honest, I know John L. is on, and if there's any thought about whether that existing fence is on our property or off that property. So it's a good question.
Yeah, if it's on your property, I'd encourage you not to replace it. I think it really helps open that up and make it safer for everybody by having that connectivity between the apartments and the Muse, which leads me to my comment. One thing I really like about, I think this is a great project. You know, I too was participated in the special glove study, and then the SBRC's on it. I like the connectivity that's been put here, especially breaking up that super block by having the both the Muse and the driveway with the pickup drop off and the garage access going through that intersect with each other and go to Arlington Boulevard. I think that's fantastic. I think it's a great solution to have the buildings built over them. I don't think it's going to be a problem that way. It's still going to look inviting and allow people to walk through without feeling unsafe. So I think that's a great solution. I very much support it. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you, if you don't need fences, don't put them in. The more open this feels, the more likely people will walk along it, use it, and make it safe. Thank you.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Maradovic, go ahead.
Yeah, this might have come up during the SPRC. So regarding the frontage on the Arlington Boulevard side, there's 30 feet, and it looks like there's a 12-foot multi-use trail. So did you all evaluate the possibility of not making that a multi-use, but kind of separating cyclists and pedestrians? And I say that to kind of continue off an earlier theme. We've been talking about the e-bikes and their rising prevalence, and we see so many more delivery riders using them. If we could, given that we have a lot of frontage, if it'd be possible to kind of separate that. And I know, I don't know what the exact condition there is in terms of utilities. I know you have buffer areas with plants and whatnot. Thank you.
Commissioner Lantelmi, did you have another thing, or is your hand still up from earlier?
No, my apologies. I'll take it down.
It happens. Commissioner Nolan, did you want to go ahead?
Yes. So two questions. One, back to the micromobility hub. First of all, I appreciate you all bringing that up. I think it's great that you're already thinking through that. But my question really is, can you provide any more pertinent details about that, such as estimated quantity, modal types, anything along those lines, just so we can make sure that it's not just something that's tossed in as a buzzword and can be actually defined a bit further. And then the second piece, I don't think this was mentioned. I saw the 201 parking spaces. I think this is one of our favorite questions. Is there any denomination planned to be EV charging capable at this point in time? Thank you.
Sure. So as to the first question, I guess I would just say that, well, try to remember both your questions in order. Do you mind actually repeating your first question for me? I apologize. It's slipping, slipping my mind right away.
So this is just back to the micromobility hub, and I was just curious, really, if there's any other pertinent details you could share there that might be available, or perhaps planning.
Sure. So actually, the reason that's not fully planned out at this point is sort of twofold. One is that's a discussion we would typically have, with DES directly about what their needs are in that area at that time. There's existing micromobility, I believe, across the street in terms of, things like the bike stations and such as that. The other aspect and the other component here is that that area is not owned by the applicant. It's not owned by the county. It's owned by VDOT. And so there's a question sort of open-ended as to, what VDOT's going to allow in that area with this development. And so, it's sort of a continuing conversation. That being said, following the special GLUF study, we are committed, to, pretty extensive micromobility in that area. The bike fix station's been mentioned a couple of times. So, we are pursuing those items. In terms of the EV charging, I think we mentioned earlier that there will be 8 spaces day one and 23 EV ready after that.
Got it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner, back to Commissioner Moravec.
Well, maybe I wasn't clear when I asked my question earlier. Is there space for a specific dedicated bike lane area instead of a multimodal trail? Kind of to separate out the cyclists and the pedestrians on the Arlington Boulevard side.
We'd have to really go back and look at some of the earlier studies on this, but what we followed was the special GLUF studies call for a multi-use trail here. Ashton, maybe you have some recollection about what we studied a lot earlier in this project, but really, the task was find a mechanism to make the best use of all that space, include the buffers, both between Arlington Boulevard, but also the residential that's happening sort of west of that, and really all those components come together, and give us the space that we've got. Ashton, I don't know if you recall specifically, any earlier iterations of that and which direction we went.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think, the ultimate goal on the design team and what was articulated in the GLUP was continuity. And, establishing a secondary transit way would have, offset that continuity and started another set. And I know, on this site, it is VDOT land, which seems, easy to work with. I think in other parts of the site, those things change. So again, underscoring, it was the GLUP that was driving that decision and based on the work that had been done there and the careful thoughtfulness of that planning.
All right, thank you.
I'll go ahead and chime in too, just because I was in all these meetings as well, and say I think a choice was definitely made that went and said, like, look, the rest of the Arlington Boulevard Trail is either 12 feet wide or less. Most of it is less. And so what is the best use of this space? Is it to create this like separation that we wouldn't see anywhere else on the trail? Or is it to make that similar 12-foot shared experience as good as we can? And I think that we took that space and really landscaped it and tried. The applicant, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the thinking there's actually some sort of berming between the trail and Arlington Boulevard to try and bring that road noise down and all of that sort of thing?
That's exactly correct. So the use of landscaping, especially on the east to block noise, obviously provides some safety. And then again, seeing that berming as you head towards the residential to provide some of that separation. And Chairman Slatt, you actually reminded me, you have to also remember too, we only control so much area within the vicinity of the site. So what happens south of this connection point in the future sort of remains to be seen. And so I think to Chairman Slatt's point, we wanted to provide the most continuity in regard to what we already know is there on the north side of this trail and what we can't really tell is going to happen in the future as you head towards Washington Boulevard there.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Theo, another thing?
Just one question, similar to my question about the cargo bikes on the ground level rooms. I assume that those ground level bike rooms would also be capable for like electric bike charging. I mean, it should be fairly easy to have like a charging stations or at least AC outlets for those.
Ashton, do you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly a design possibility, and I know that the owner is focused on, he's a big believer in scooter transit and electric bike transit, especially in its proximity to metro. So I think that those will be things that'll be incorporated into the design as we move forward, but certainly not in there just yet.
Thank you.
Cool. I think we're getting close to a motion, so I'm going to throw in two last bits, one for staff and one for the applicant. The one for staff is, I think there are still some references in the board report to only a single direction of protected bike lane on Pershing that probably need to get cleaned up before it goes to the board. And then I guess actually this is for both staff and the applicant. I will reiterate my statement at the last SPRC, which is that the detour when rebuilding the Arlington Boulevard Trail is going to be very hard and very important, and you need to start thinking about it early. There are not good options to send Arlington Boulevard Trail traffic other than on the existing Arlington Boulevard Trail through your site. So think now about that construction phasing and how you can safely accommodate those folks, because one of those folks is me. And I will complain to all of you if you send me to an unsafe place. So with that said, are there any additional commissioner comments or questions? Otherwise, I will move us to a motion. All right, then I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the ordinance for site plan number 22-06, SP number 469, to permit an 8-story mixed-use building with approximately 251 dwelling units and approximately 3,000 square feet of retail or retail equivalent use, with modifications of zoning ordinance requirements, including additional density, reduced residential and retail parking ratios, signs, and other modifications as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan, subject to the conditions of that ordinance, along with the associated rezoning and GLUP amendment, as outlined in our draft board report dated June 23rd, 2023.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Lantelmi. Is there any discussion of the motion? And I'm looking virtually to see if I missed hands earlier. I did not. Anybody else? All right, then we will move to a vote. Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
And did Commissioner Locker or Commissioner Terry come? Oh, yes, Commissioner Terry is here.
Aye.
Great. And I will also vote yes. So that motion passes 9-0. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 1400 Fairfax Drive, and we have staff member Jane Kim again introducing the applicant. Thank you.
Hi, it's me again. It's actually 4600 Fairfax Drive, the Ballston Holiday Inn site.
Excuse me, please. Mute your microphone on Teams. Is it muted?
All right. So that's not better? No.
It's me.
Yep, it's not muted on Teams. It's not showing it's muted. Oh, now it is. Try now.
Okay. How about now? Okay. And I think for the team, we have Kathy Puskar representing the applicant as well as members of their design team. they can introduce themselves as they present.
Are you ready for us?
Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. For the record, my name is Kathy Puskar with Walsh Colucci, and I'm happy to be here this evening to talk to you about 4600 Fairfax Drive. I have Chris Cabot with me from Wells and Associates, as well as Andrea Gerhardt and Mary Beth Avedizian from Hoffman, and Karen White. I can't forget her, our engineer. So just starting quickly, if we go to the next slide. Oops, you can see that up there.
Yeah, I'm trying to. There it is.
Okay. Great. Go to the next slide. So this is a view of the existing site. This site is subject to site plan number 57, so it shows you how far back we're going on this property. The office building was built in 1969 and the hotel was built in 1987. You can see it's an asphalt canyon of surface parking and above grade parking garage, multiple curb cuts with no access permitted across and through the site. We do have existing utilities along Fairfax Drive and along the western portion of the site under the drive aisle that have informed how we have designed our redevelopment of this site. I would also note at the bottom, North Wakefield Street and North Woodrow, that kind of dead end into the property. Next. And here is our current proposal. It includes the larger building number 1, which is a multifamily rental building, and then 2 buildings on the western side that are multifamily buildings that are designed to be triplexes. They're for sale units. As part of this proposal, we have created an enhanced streetscape along Fairfax Drive with a 12-foot wide sidewalk and adjacent streetscape. We have a new alley service connection at the southern portion of the site, which now connects North Woodrow and North Wakefield Streets, and we'll have a public access easement over that road. We also have a multi-use trail shared path that goes from the south connecting Woodrow to the north of Fairfax Drive for bikes and pedestrians. There is no vehicular connection through the site. While we accommodate bikes and peds, we have separated the access for the multifamily building. So access to that, to and from the parking for the multifamily building number 1 happens from Fairfax Drive. And then the access for loading, unloading, and the triplex units comes via Woodrow and Wakefield from the south. We have reduced the impervious pavement on the site by 11.5%, and we are also proposing LEED Gold certification at the 0.25 FAR level. Here's just a little data about the project. In all, it is 450 units, 420 in building 1 and 15 in each of the buildings 2 and 3. You can see here the parking ratio proposed for building 1 is a 0.91, and then 1 space per unit for each of the triplexes in buildings 2 and 3 for a combined ratio of a 0.92. And then finally, just for my portion of this presentation, just give you all a couple of images of what the proposed project looks like. This is looking looking west along Fairfax Drive. You can see the curb cut where vehicles will be able to leave the site, and then we will have access to the site at the intersection. The next slide is a view of the triplex units that are in building 2 and 3, and those front along that shared use path. And then finally, here's an image that just shows you the character of that shared use path that runs between the multifamily building number 1 and the triplexes. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Cabot to get into the details of the transportation aspects of our proposal. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to go through a few slides here showing the circulation. And Ms. Puskar already talked about it, so I'll breeze through them here and get into more detail a little bit later. But this overall slide shows the circulation for all the user groups, the bikes, the peds, and the vehicles. But I just wanted to point out on this slide, the bike room in the top left corner of Building 1, and that has direct access to that shared use path at the ground level. And then the loading dock on the south side of the building on the new road. And then on the northeast corner is the garage entrance for Building 1. Getting into the vehicle circulation specifically, again, I talked about the garage access on the north side of the building. As Ms. Puskar said, that is only accessed by Fairfax Drive. You cannot get from the south, North Wakefield or North Woodrow to that garage access. There is full movement at the Fairfax Drive, North Wakefield intersection and right out only on the east side of the site. The buildings 2 and 3, the triplexes do have access from the south via North Woodrow and North Wakefield through the new road that is built. For pedestrians and bike connectivity, you can see along Fairfax Drive that the Bluemont Trail to the west has a connection to the property, and with the redevelopment, we're widening the frontage along Fairfax Drive for that trail, and I'll get into a little more specifics on that in a few slides. Again, there's the new trail that Ms. Puskar talked about, north-south through the sites between buildings 1 and 2 and 3 that connect down to North Woodrow and North Wakefield. So let's talk about some comparisons today versus with the redevelopment. Along Fairfax Drive, you can see here that there are 4 curb cuts, 1 to the west, 2 at North Wakefield, a signalized intersection, and 1 full movement driveway there to the east, on the east side. With, excuse me there, with the redevelopment, the western driveway will be for emergency access only, and that'll be controlled by a mountable curb signage. And then on the inside of the site, there's a bollards with a chain to restrict vehicles from exiting the site there. And then as we get to the garage access and the signalized intersection with North Wakefield, that is shown here. So we have full movement access at North Wakefield with the signalized intersection. And then we have our vehicular courtyard, if you will, for vehicles to get into the garage. And then also for like the pickup and drop off, taxi, Uber, food delivery, those vehicles can enter from Fairfax Drive at North Wakefield and then exit right out to Fairfax Drive without having to turn around. I just wanted to show the cross section of Fairfax Drive and really here just point out that width of the shared use trail along the frontage is 12 feet wide. So as you're coming off of the Bluemont Trail, you can continue east to the signalized intersection and cross over to the cycle track, or you could continue on. There is a eastbound bike lane on Fairfax Drive. And I also just wanted to point out the separation from the curb to the building frontage, or the property line to the building frontage, is about 38 feet. On the south side of the site, we already talked about the existing condition, how North Wakefield has a cul-de-sac and North Woodrow has the hammerhead, but vehicles can enter the site from the south to a parking garage over on the east side with North Wakefield. And then on North Woodrow, you can exit or get into the parking lot. There is a gate control there, but vehicles can traverse the site north to south to those Woodrow and Wakefield streets. With the new road, you can see here that driveway on the south side of the building, that's the loading dock. And then as you could then continue, vehicles could continue west to the triplexes. There are sidewalks on both sides of the new road, on the north and the south side, and landscaping strips. And then you can see as the path comes down in between the 2 buildings, that intersection with North Woodrow and the North Road and the shared use path, we're controlling that with four-way stop to protect the bicyclists, the vehicles, and the pedestrians. I'm just showing the cross section of the new road there. It is wide enough for fire purposes, a 26-foot fire lane, and just showing the sidewalks, 5 feet on the south and 6 feet on the north side. And there is landscape strips on both sides of the street as well. Let's turn to the shared use path here. This rotated a bit here, so your north is to the right of the page, looking to the right, and that would be Fairfax Drive on the right side of the page, and the new road on the left side of the page. The shared use path is again has landscaping on either side of it, and there's actually a sidewalk on the private part of the property that goes along the triplex buildings. There's also benches and bike racks along the path and at either end. Showing the cross section here, it does show that that trail is 12 feet wide, the landscaping on both sides, and then the 4-foot sidewalk. The shared use path and all that landscaping is in the public access easement. I haven't really talked about this side of the project yet, but this is the western boundary, and we're just showing the cross section here. This is the alley, if you will, that provides access to the driveways for the triplex units, and just pointing out here that that is a 23.5-foot drive aisle appropriate for turning movements in and out of the driveways, and then the landscape buffer to the property line, and including a tree save area within that landscaping. Here I wanted to show you really the location of this site and the proximity to all the transportation facilities. Within a quarter-mile radius, there's several bus stops. As you can see along here, there's Capital Bike Share, the bike lanes along Fairfax Drive, although not highlighted here. And then within about a third of a mile is the Ballston Marymount Metro Station. We did do MMTA for this project, and I think we talked about it during some of the SPRCs, but I'll just highlight a few points here. We already talked about the multimodal pedestrian system in the area, the driveways, and all we talked about, as well as the pedestrian and bike enhancements. I did want to point out that this residential project actually generates fewer AM and PM peak hour vehicle trips compared to the hotel and the office use when they are fully operating. With that, the adjacent intersections we found operate with similar functionality compared to the future conditions without the redevelopment. And then the applicant will also be implementing a transportation management plan. And some of the highlights there, some of these are standard to you all, but they will maintain a relationship with Arlington Transportation Partners. They will designate a property transportation coordinator and contribute funds to Arlington County Commuter Services. There will be an electronic display in the Building 1 lobby. We talked about the bike room that's in Building 1 with direct access to the ground level, and providing parking for construction workers as a standard. The residents will also be given either their choice on initial lease up, but a Smart Trip card with $65, or their choice of either a bike share or car share membership. We'll also distribute new employee and resident packages in that initial lease up period. And then lastly, we will be doing the monitoring studies and submitting the annual letters to the county manager. With that, I wrap up this part of the presentation. We're happy to hear your discussion and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kim, do you have a presentation to add?
Yes, I do have another brief presentation. So the modifications requested with this site plan are for additional density, the residential parking reduction, loading requirement reduction, and density exclusions. As was mentioned previously, the multifamily building, building 1, has a 0.9 parking ratio. The minimum per the residential parking guidelines is 0.4. And then buildings 2 and 3 have, 1 space per unit, but technically a tandem space in their driveway for any visitor parking. And so we're comfortable with the request to modify. And again, the key transportation and DS elements, the new shared use path. And here we do have some mode separation for at least the residents who may be walking alongside their units. The improved streetscape on Fairfax, I think, is a key improvement, connecting to the existing trails and providing adequate sidewalk trail width there. And then overall, the project actually reduces impervious area from the existing condition. They will be meeting all required state stormwater regulations and have looked at the overland relief in the event of large-scale 100, 500-year storms and have infrastructure in place to mitigate stormwater in those events so that existing and proposed buildings are minimally impacted. So county staff recommends adoption of the proposed site plan amendment. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Kim. Ms. Obukoya, I believe we had a commenter sign up to speak on this item.
Before we get to the speaker, though, Michael Haluski is on the call for the vacation.
Oh, okay. Mr. Haluski, I believe you're still on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Commissioner Slatt. Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Obukoya. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michael Haluski. I'm a real estate specialist with the Department of Environmental Services. Here to present a couple of vacations, 3 vacations, in fact, that are associated with this project. The first 2 I'll talk about, they don't implicate the comprehensive plan or the master transportation plan. Those 2, the one you see on the west side of the site, the area to be vacated, that's a 3-foot strip of that existing 62-foot wide public utilities easement. And the second ordinance of vacation is to vacate all of the various existing fire lane easements that crisscross all of the existing surface and above grade parking on the site. But the last vacation that does implicate the master transportation plan is the one that is on the southeast corner of the site. It's a small corner of the larger multifamily building that extends into an existing public street and utilities easement that is proposed to be vacated. I'm happy to answer any questions related to those vacations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Obukoya, our commenter on this item.
Yes, now we have speaker Mr. Bernard Byrne speaking as an individual. Mr. Byrne, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. The project's plan violates several recommendations in the county's transportation plan advisory element. Cyclists, motor scooter operators, and pedestrians will experience conflicts and will run the risk of accidental injuries. This project will have less green space and more impermeable surfaces than is desirable or feasible. Bikes, motor scooters, and pedestrians will travel together on a curving 12-foot wide multi-purpose, multi-use trail that will connect Fairfax Drive with Woods Road, Wilkville Streets. Some will travel side by side blocking the inevitable speeders that the wide trail will attract. When you build a wide trail, the speeders flock to it. And people, as you can see on the W trail and elsewhere, people just walk side by side, and you can't avoid that. And travel bike side by side. A 23-foot wide access road parallels the trail. We're traveling on this project's west side. That wide access road is better suited for bikes and scooters than is the trail. However, the road will receive little such use if the project's design does not change. The bicycle element recommends separating pedestrian and bikes rather than having them use shared use trails. The element also recommends the construction of facilities that will encourage faster stride cyclists to relocate from shared trails to on-street bike lanes. The element further recommends that lightly used trails will be only 8 feet wide and nowhere near 12 feet, thus producing a smaller paved footprint and increasing screen space. This trail will receive very little use, as it will not directly connect to trails or major streets at its south end. That's a very important point. You don't build a 12-foot wide trail with that little use. However, people will speed on it and go side by side. The trail's 12-foot width, therefore violates the bicycle element. Reduce the trail's width to 8 feet, and I've been saying this repeatedly. The access road will dead end near Fairfax Drive. It will have little automobile traffic. Signs can direct bikes and scooters to the access road to prevent accidents. Paint a bike lane on the side of the road that is opposite to the garages and the adjacent triplex units. That's on the extreme west side. Put a bike lane there. Take the bike lane. To summarize, paint a bike lane on the access road. Erect signs that direct the bikes and scooters to the road. Reduce the multi-use trails use to 6 feet. Erect signs that direct pedestrians to the multi-use trail. Increase green space near the trail. Now, I think you won't do this, but that's the way to really make a transit to the site. That's a real transportation plan. Separate the cyclists from the pedestrians. Use an existing road that's 23 feet wide for the cyclists.
Your time is up. Thank you. And I'd also like to note that Mr. Byrne also sent in commentary for you all to review as part of this application.
Thank you very much, Ms. Obukoya. And yes, we did receive Mr. Burns' written testimony as well. All right, commissioners, if you want to throw your hands up, if you have questions or comments, I will just give a quick brief overview because I was the SPRC rep for this project. I commend the applicant. This project has come a long way. It's one of the few sites I've seen in the many years of reviewing development in Arlington where a very dramatic change was made from what was initially proposed to what we see before us today. The initial proposal had what I can only describe as a serpentine fire access road that ate up a really kind of astounding amount of the site and some circulation that was very weird. This is a dramatic improvement and I think will really be a big improvement to this area of Arlington County. It's going to make a big difference for people using the Bluemont Junction Trail. It's going to be just a much nicer thing to look at for everybody who lives in the neighborhood. And as Ms. Kim pointed out, an overall reduction in impervious surface on the site, which is certainly important given the topography and the hydrology of the area, which is great. The other thing I wanted to add is a little bit of historical context. Years ago, the development that is currently houses the Target and the Silver Diner in Ballston came through, and there was a cyclist you may have heard of named Bernard Byrne, who gave a lot of public testimony to the county board and to the commission about how difficult and dangerous it is to bike on Glebe Road. It ultimately resulted in the county board directing staff to do a study of potential bike facilities on Glebe Road. That study came forward later to this commission, which basically said it's possible, but we don't recommend it at this time, given all of the trade-offs that would need to be made from a traffic management standpoint and throughput standpoint and safety standpoint, but recommended that the county work diligently to, in the interim, create some useful parallel facilities to Glebe Road. The most important of which is on the west side of Glebe, using Tazewell Street and a number of other side streets. But the biggest impediment to which is, or soon was, this site. And that is why in the bicycle element, there is a specific project called out that is a trail through this site connecting Fairfax Drive to Woodrow and Wilson, that this site contemplates building, which will make a big difference in that. If you'd like to bike north-south in the vicinity of Ballston and you would like to not be on Glebe Road, we are getting close to being able to cobble together an actual useful facility, and this makes a big difference in that. So wanted to give that historical context while everybody formulated their questions and their comments, and we will start with Commissioner Theo.
Yes, I remember this project, I guess before this major revision, and also thinking that the roadways were very serpentine and sort of a waste of space. So I'm very happy with the revised plan. It looks much, much nicer. So thank you for that. Couple of questions. One is, I'm sure there's a reason, so I'm looking to be sort of educated on this, but with both North Woodrow and North Wakefield, why both of those have vehicular access to the new road? It seems kind of redundant, and I am one that's all for removing redundancy in vehicular pathways. Seems to me that one of those could be potentially closed off to vehicular traffic. I mean, still accessible by bike, but so I'm just wondering what the reasoning is for both of those to be accessible. I am also imagine that probably the households on one or the other of those streets would be grateful for a reduction of pass-through traffic, but looking forward to hearing the reasoning for both of those having access. And the other comment is with the 0.91 parking space ratio, that's of course with all three multi-use or multifamily units, that does seem excessive for Ballston. I used to live in Ballston up until about a year ago, and I loved it because it seemed to me the most connected neighborhood in all of Arlington, with bus routes, bike trails, and bike lanes. And so for almost one parking space per unit ratio seems like a lot of parking for such a connected neighborhood.
Okay, let me start with the road connection. So as we mentioned, the road's dead end into the property today, and we were just connecting that grid. I think as we mentioned that we don't anticipate a lot of traffic on that road because it's serving the 30 triplex units. So it's literally the individuals and their guests coming in and out to get to their homes. And it's also for loading and unloading. So trash and deliveries and move-ins, move-outs. With the county's encouragement, and I think the SPRC supported it, we completed that grid by just connecting those two streets. That also allowed us to put sidewalks on either side and create a meaningful connection there versus, as you mentioned, dead ending one, and then you go down that road and you can't get to the property. It just seemed to make sense to us. So as to the parking ratio, yes, we are near Ballston, and you saw the exhibits about what's available a quarter mile, half mile from where we are. But we also think in this location, based on Hoffman's experience with other projects and parking ratios, as well as the fact that we don't have any on-street parking here. We're not in the middle of Ballston where you can kind of walk just a little ways and park on street. We think that it is advisable both for the ratio for our residents and for visitors who will come and visit the people in the building here because they don't have any opportunity on street.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Maradovic.
Yeah, I actually like that the street's not blocked off, that there are these connections. I think it's more in accordance with the MTP that promotes the grid and having this porosity throughout space. I remember biking through there like a couple years ago, and I found that area to be really weird. So it kind of makes sense now more. I would like to echo Commissioner Theo's concerns about the parking ratio for 1/3 a third of a mile from Boston. I think I could see that. I mean, I understand that you have your own studies and you don't want to build more parking than you need to because it's a cost to you as well. But I could see this going the direction of the Bartlett, where they had a parking ratio 1. Now they're down to a 0.7 is what they decided they actually really needed. You know, with new all the new development that's coming online in Boston, like I think it's already conducive to a lower parking ratio, but I think it will be even more so with the new grocery store down at the Macy's site and everything. But one little question that I had was the trail. This is like a really niche thing. Is it possible to kind of like taper it more towards the direction of the when you're coming out to Fairfax Drive? And so you can either, and then it hits that sidewalk. Is it possible to kind of like taper it more towards that intersection and make it more continuous? So that way you don't need to like come out on a sidewalk and then go right and then cross the street, kind of to make it look more like a continuous grid. Because from what I understand, you can really only turn east once you get out there, to head further into Boston or to cross the street over to Custis. So I was wondering, you know, just like maybe make it a little bit more rounded and have it really look like a kind of a highway for bicycles. Like, I think that would be cool.
This is an interesting part of Boston. There is the cycle track that's on that north side of Fairfax Drive.
Correct.
And so we do recognize that there is the on-street bike lane as you go from Wakefield to Glebe. But we really wanted to encourage coming from Bluemont Trail across to use the signalized crossing to get over to that cycle track. That's part of the purpose there. And then
because it kind of looks like you come out and then you come out on the sidewalk and then you have to like go up, make a sharp turn several feet up to get to the signalized crossing.
Oh, from the north-south trail?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see. I guess that was just, we were trying to have the balance between getting to the Bluemont Trail and the signalized intersection, instead of having to, if you're coming from the west, having to double back.
I think that is what we were looking at, because you're talking about if you're going east, but we also have people coming from the west or people from the neighborhood connecting east and west. And so that direct shot, then they can make that decision versus going too far one direction or the other. And as Chris said, having to kind of circle back to get to where they're trying to go.
All right. That
like a logical landing.
Yeah, that's my ignorance then, because I thought people would be only going either into Boston or crossing north. I didn't know there was that much in that direction over there. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and also don't forget the sidewalk on Fairfax Drive will also be a 12-foot wide shared use trail.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yes.
I guess actually just a very.
You can go.
All right. Just to follow up with the prior question regarding the trail potentially, instead of going straight in the hard right turn, would it be possible to fork a little bit? I mean, it adds a little bit more pavement, but having it go to both the left and the right, because I could see like myself, if I were biking along that route, along that north-south trail, hitting that hard right turn right there, and then having to make another hard right turn to cross Fairfax, it's a pain. So throwing that out there.
Clearly, we're balancing, right? Landscaping, hardscaping. And so I think we'd prefer to keep it the way it is. But I think you guys are going to have to slow down just a little bit as you go through that neighborhood.
Commissioner Shannon.
Well, that's my primary connection into Boston. So to Chairman Slatt, on the detour piece for Arlington Boulevard, I also ask you for the detour considerations there because of that push into Fairfax Drive. So it's just something to think about, because there's a good amount of use that comes through there.
Commissioner Lantelmi online.
Yes, thank you. I want to concur with Commissioner Maradovic about the not having dead ends on the two streets. He's correct that the MTP really does discourage dead ends and encourages connectivity. This way, whatever traffic is generated will be shared by both streets rather than one street only being burdened. And I think it just gives better access, better circulation is the goal of the MTP, and not having and minimizing the number of dead end streets does that. So I'm fully in support of both those streets going through to the site. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none. I will go ahead and move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the site plan amendment ordinance for site plan number 57 to expand the site area by approximately 4,635 square feet, construct up to 450 multifamily residential dwelling units located at 4600 and 4610 Fairfax Drive with modifications of zoning ordinance requirements, including additional density, reduced parking and loading requirements, density exclusions, and other modifications as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan. And furthermore, I move that the Transportation Commission find that the ordinances of vacation are substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan, including the master transportation plan of Arlington County, Virginia. Those vacations as outlined in our draft board report dated July 15th, 2023. Sorry, June 9th, 2023. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Theo. Any discussion of the motion? Is staff comfortable that I have successfully captured the motion? Good, okay. Then we will move to a vote. Since I'm not seeing anybody online or anybody here, Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
And I too will vote yes. That passes unanimously, 9-0. Thank you very much to the applicant and to Ms. Kim.
Next on the agenda is the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority FY 2024 through FY 2029 call for regional transportation projects. And we have staff member Richard Rossman on the, in person. That's right. I knew that.
Good evening, commissioners. Again, for the record, I'm Rich Roisman, DES Transportation staff. This item is for capital funding applications to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for the fiscal year 24 to 29 6-year program. Excuse me. I came before you last month with this as an information item presenting 6 candidate projects that we were considering. As a refresher, those 6 candidate projects were the CC to DCA multimodal connection, the Arlington Memorial Trail, Washington Old Dominion Trail gap analysis, Courthouse Metro elevator expansion, Shirlington bus station expansion, and something related to ART fueling infrastructure. Following that and review of eligibility criteria and likelihood of funding, we have narrowed this down to 2 projects, which are before you in the board report that you should have received ahead of time. I do not have a slide deck to go with it. Those 2 projects are the CC to DCA multimodal connection and the Shirlington bus station expansion. Since the time of issuing the draft board report, staff has continued to look at the cost estimates associated with both projects and have done some refinement based on new information. So with that, the request for the Shirlington bus station expansion has gone from $7 million to $11,600,000. We are still reviewing the costs for the CC to DCA multimodal connection associated with the preferred alternative that was approved by the county board in May. So that request may change before we go final to the board. We are still reviewing it based on that information, as well as connectivity with adjacent infrastructure such as the VRE station and the connection with the airport itself. With the new total for Shirlington bus station expansion, that will take the total request to the authority for 2 applications to $27.9 million. I will stop there for any questions.
Anybody have any questions? This was teed up in the past, so there's not a lot of new information here other than what we have gotten down to, both of which I think are excellent projects. CC to DCA is going to be a game changer in Crystal City, make National Airport about the most connected airport, definitely in the United States. Probably would be a bit presumptuous to say the world. And then, man, I don't know if anybody has jumped into the transit strategic plan update that our ART bus system is going through. I'm sure we're going to get a briefing on that pretty soon. But I did, and man, there are a lot of routes that go to the Shirlington bus station, and more planned, including from Alexandria with the West End Transitway expansion. And that sits on a real tiny piece of land. So I do not envy whatever poor person has to try and cram more buses into that very postage stamp sized piece of land. But we are getting our money's worth out of that bus station, and I think we will only continue to do so in the future. Anybody come up with any questions in the interim while I pontificated? Commissioner Lantelmi, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have questions, but I will pontificate. I concur about this Shirlington bus building. I've been there a number of times. It's great. I wish the county had more of those. I wish that the Boston bus thing was more like that than how it was rebuilt. So I'm fully in support of this. And with Shirlington, of course, with the Alexandria BRT going there, it's going to have even more use, and having a permanent building there, expanded building, fits so well with the whole concept of BRT. So, it's a virtuous cycle. So anyway, definitely let's move forward with it. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Theo.
I am curious, in, I guess, broad brushstrokes, what is accounting for the jump from the 7 million to the approximate 11 million for the Shirlington bus depot? Is that because of a great increase in scope from like the Alexandria connections?
So the cost estimate in the adopted CIP is $4.5 million. That was done with very little planning work, and so the escalation between now and then is a combination of additional planning work. And when we did the more detailed look to get from 7 million to 11.6, we looked at the costs that have been associated with the bus bay project at East Falls Church as a close comparable. And based on what we've seen there, that's how we got to the 11.6 million.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands other than Commissioner Lantelmi's, which I'm guessing is a vestige from his previous pontification, I'm going to go ahead and move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the County Board adopt Arlington County's application to the NVETA for, what's that updated amount, Mr. Roisman?
$27,900,000.
$27,900,000 for 2 projects, the CC to DCA multimodal connection, Arlington bus station expansion.
Second.
Any discussion of that motion? Then we will move to a vote. Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Shannon.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
And I too will vote yes. That passes unanimously, 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roisman.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Thomas Holman. Okay, Hillman, sorry. For e-bikes, and it's an information item. Welcome.
Someday ACCS is going to figure out that they have to bring an action item to TC if they don't want to be last, but it hasn't happened yet.
We're loading.
Can you make sure to turn on and use your mic, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you all for having us. My name is Tom. I'm here on behalf of Arlington County Commuter Services at the request of Jim Larson, the Bureau Chief. Just giving a brief update on capital bike share and the new e-bike model that was launched this spring.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you need to share your screen in order for these slides to appear on the recording and for those who may be following along at home?
Yeah.
There it is. Now it is. Awesome. Thank you.
And can you speak a little bit closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
Sorry, it's designed for short people.
Understood. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, next slide, if you would. So the first piece of information that we wanted to share was just a new milestone for the system. We reached the new record for the most trips in any month in the history of Capital Bike Share last month in May of 2023. That surpassed July of 2017, which was the previous record. And that included both casual trips and member trips, which were up relative to 2019. So a banner year so far for Capital Bike Share across the region. Next slide. So zooming into Arlington, it's a similar trend. So ridership has fully rebounded from the pandemic, and it's up over 40% since December of 2019. So yeah, just sharing that ridership is high, and we're really excited about that trend from the perspective of the system. Next slide. So the other news we wanted to share was the launch of the new e-bike. So this is Cosmo. It's a new model of e-bike that had been on order for a while, and we're really excited to bring to the system. Arlington purchased 131 of these, and there's more than 950 that have been purchased regionally to be added to the system. It's a big upgrade from the last model of e-bike. It's a more intuitive and smoother ride. It has an automatic gear shift as opposed to having to fumble with the gear shifter while one is riding along. And it has brighter lights and a front light beacon that makes it more visible to folks at night for increased safety. Next slide. So this is just a reminder of the service area for e-bikes in the county. It's pretty much the whole county. There are some areas where they're indicated in pink where e-bike parking is not allowed. There are some stations that e-bikes can be parked at in those areas. Next slide. And just a little bit of data on the new e-bikes. Over 700 have been deployed across the system so far. Of note, they get more trips per bike per day than our classic pedal bikes. So they get almost 5 trips are taken every day on each of these bikes. Which is close to twice as many as the pedal bikes. And they're well liked. The average user rating is over 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that's what we have. Any questions? Happy to take them.
Oh, there will be questions. We don't get capital bike share that often. Thank you for the presentation. That was fantastic. My first question is about those no park zones. So I totally understand our neighbors, our partners like the Pentagon certainly have, restrictions on that sort of stuff. But a lot of those look like county parks. Is that the case? And can you talk to how those decisions are made about where the no parking zones are for e-bikes and capital bike share?
It's a great question. The short answer is that, yeah, we work with stakeholders, to determine where e-bikes can be parked. With respect to county parks, I think that's what I have to get back to you on.
Who else has questions? Commissioner Theo.
Yes, I guess following up with the restrictions of where capital bike share can be parked. Right now, I noticed that Langston Boulevard, there's basically the north side of Langston Boulevard is basically a no-go. With the plan Langston Boulevard coming up, is capital bike share in your office working with sort of the plan Langston Boulevard efforts there to expand the areas where capital bike share could be used?
Yeah, so what I could say is that functionally it's relatively straightforward to implement changes to the no parking area. So, with a project like that, it's certainly something we would look at, to expand the allowed parking area.
Commissioner Shannon.
Yes, I know the fleet has gone through an evolution and you now have the e-bikes. Are there plans in the future for a cargo e-bike or a more utilitarian e-bike, especially as you start to see greater use in the area?
It's a fantastic question. The short answer is that right now that equipment is not available that would be compatible with the system. But yeah, it's certainly something that would be of interest. I think, the way that other bike share systems have addressed that is, looking at sort of ways to augment, the sort of everyday, system with essentially supplemental rental options. So for something like a cargo bike, which would be used less frequently, maybe for specific trip purpose types, having perhaps a central location where those bikes could be rented, sort of through a separate process than the day-to-day, function of the system.
Well, thank you. And if I may refine it a bit more, is also riders with younger children. I understand there may be a liability piece in there, but any thought of adaptation to families on it's probably more a little focused question there, but having a 3-year-old, there have been times where I'm like, well, this might have been a great opportunity. I've wanted to put him in the basket in front, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, if there were a safer option to, as far as child seating or something like that, I think it's a great idea, and certainly something we can take back and consider.
Cool. Before we move to the next commissioner, I just wanted to double down on Commissioner Shannon's comments. Because it's a theme that I hear over and over again, talking to people, is that Arlington has really great options to help you be car light or car free until you have children, and then all of them cease to be useful. It's just like all of a sudden, capital bike share is no longer useful because you can't take your child on it, and short-term car rental all of a sudden becomes this like massive pain because you have to like buckle a car seat into this car and then take it back out again every single time you use it. And then, getting strollers onto buses and just everything gets dramatically harder the moment you have children. And it's something we need to work on. So just another plug for capital bike share. Finding a way to allow you to take your kid on a bike share bike would be a game changer. Commissioner Terry has been waiting very patiently online.
Hey, good evening. I know we all know the safest way to ride a bike is wearing a helmet, and just wondering what capital bike share is doing to encourage that, and also if you have any data on how many people are actually wearing helmets when they get the bikes.
Yeah, thanks for that question. The short answer is that helmets are available for purchase. They're subsidized. They're quite affordable, and so that has been part of the program since its inception. In terms of the data that you're asking about, it is not something that we track, and so I don't think those are available.
Can I do a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Are y'all planning to try to collect some of those data? I think it'd be helpful, right? Because certainly bike shares used by people sometimes who are um, in the moment and not thinking about buying a helmet. And so if we could gather data of how many people are using helmets and where some might be able to be placed or some other way to just facilitate people to be safe, I think that might be interesting to know.
Yeah, for sure. I could definitely look into that. One piece of data that we do track is any crash involving Capital Bike Share where there's a serious injury. We're notified of those right away, and they're extremely infrequent throughout the region.
Following up on that, I know in the past, bike share has been considered to have a remarkably good safety record, despite anecdotally there not being a lot of helmet use on Capital Bike Share or City Bike or any of the other bike share systems. Have you seen any shift in that with the advent of e-bikes? I know there was a lot of conjecture early on in bike share that its safety record was so exemplary because nobody could go more than about 7 miles an hour on your typical bike share bike. And that's not the case anymore. Have you seen a rise compared to number of trips in reported crashes, fatalities, injuries, anything like that?
Yeah, it's great question. The answer is no. So yeah, essentially the same, good safety record, continues despite, the introduction of the e-bikes. I think a lot of the reason for that is, they have a low center of gravity. They're more robust than a typical bicycle, so they don't sort of turn or swerve quite as quickly as one's personal bike might. And also, I think drivers see people operating, bike share bikes as, perhaps more inexperienced, to, the previous comment. And so, they may tend to give a little bit more space, to people riding. But yeah, the short answer is that we have not seen any uptick in those types of incidents.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Commissioner Shannon, back to you.
Yeah, me again. West of George Mason and south of Wilson Boulevard seems to be kind of this bubble of there aren't any stations there. There seem to be more electric scooters and bikes from other competitors showing up in that space throughout the area. Is that something that you're looking to expand into those spaces that are a little further away from major transit hubs?
Yeah, we certainly could. It's always a trade-off in terms of expansion stations, in terms of just identifying where they're most likely to get the most use, and we look at other factors too, things like equity and, where there is or is not already access to the system, to your point. So we can certainly, take a look at that area as we're looking for locations for future stations.
Piggybacking on that, years ago, Capital Bike Share did what I think is one of the first strategic plans of any bike share station that I've seen, very similar to a Virginia transit development plan that kind of outlined and planned Capital Bike Share's expansion within Arlington County. And I believe we've pretty much tapped out everything that was in that original plan from an expansion standpoint. Is Bike Share looking at doing another plan that would kind of lay out, if we were to expand, this is where it would be and this is what we would be trying to accomplish?
I think it's a fantastic idea.
But not currently planned?
We don't have anything that I'm aware of, in the budget for that, but certainly could look into it.
Commissioner Muradovic, I think you were.
Yeah, going back to the cargo bike discussion and the kids and everything, it seems like well, first of all, like all of this data is awesome. It's like new bikes look great, and it's really cool people riding on them look cool too. So I think that's a big plus for the system. But also, I think for the cargo bikes and everything, the better route might be to go down what some of the other cities have gone, like Denver and whatnot, and just give subsidies to people. And maybe given that Arlington has this great thing with Capital Bike Share to limit it to electric cargo bikes or whatever if you don't want to undermine that. But regarding your point of the not an increase in accidents and Commissioner Terry's comment about the helmets, there are now studies that show that maybe the fact that they have no protective gear makes them safer in a way, because I forget the study that came out that all this protective gear dehumanizes cyclists and leads to drivers giving them even less berth when passing by. So that might be, anecdotal evidence. I wouldn't extrapolate too far from it, but a counterintuitive example of maybe not being safe ending up being safer. So that, but yeah, great stuff on the Capital Bike Share. That's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Any final questions for our new bike share manager? All right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Terry has her hand up.
Oh, wait. Commissioner Terry, back to you.
Yeah, I would just love to see the data from the report that people in vehicles think that bike share riders are not as strong riders and therefore give them more space. That's news to me. So I'd love to see that report. And also we'd just love to make sure and remind everybody cyclist and pedestrian deaths are the leading cause of increases in deaths on the roadways and have increased by double digits over the last 10 years. And, we want to get people out on bikes. And we want to make sure they're able to do it day after day after day. And the more we can provide them a safe way to do it, the better off they'll be.
I'll try to dig that up and send it to you, Commissioner Terry. I think it was like on GG Wash like several months ago, but yeah.
Great. Anything else? All right. Now, thank you very much for your presentation and your answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes this meeting. The next meeting is September. That's not a conclusion of the meeting. Sorry about that. September 7th is the next meeting. And Chairman, do you have any other business to discuss?
No, I don't, other than enjoy a month without a meeting. We don't meet in August because the county board doesn't meet in August. And talk to your networks because we are currently down a commissioner, and it makes it harder and harder to be in-person quorum when we're down a commissioner. I've got a couple that I've talked to in the past that we can tap, but I always like to have some choices to try and keep a representative group of people up here to make sure we're reflecting the beautiful diversity that is Arlington County. So does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Anything from site plan review or liaising to other commissions or committees or anything like that? Commissioner Maradovic.
I attended this Monday my first meeting of the Crystal Cities and Pentagon Cities Council. I think that's the full name of it.
Doesn't it have some really fun acronym now too?
Yeah, like CCPC.
It's a lot.
Yeah. I think the most interesting thing from that meeting was talking about that Costco site and the broader site, which is it's part of its own sector plan, and basically it's owned by Kimco, and they really want to kind of, it seems like they're headed in the direction of bring it in compliance with Pentagon City sector plan, even though formally it's not a part of that. So, but that thing will take forever to really work out. So that was that. Other than that, it was just like a lot of very local issues, but it was pretty good overall. It's a good turnout in that little council, I guess is what you would call it. Yeah.
That's great to hear, because I will say Pentagon Center has been kind of what I would call a bastion of mediocre planning in Arlington County. It's a PDSP that predated my appearance on the Transportation Commission, so it's old. And then they came in to update it. And we were like, great, finally we can make this plan suck a lot less. And they were like, no, if you want to change it too much, keep our existing approval and go forward with that, which is why there is several floors of above ground parking sitting directly on top of the Pentagon City Metro Station. So lovely to hear that we have another bite at that apple. Anything else? Commissioner Shannon?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, goodness. Yes, Commissioner Terry.
Oh, sorry, doing to step in. The study that I had asked for was actually one referenced by the Capital Bike Share representative and not Commissioner Muradovic. So just wanted to clarify that.
Cool. Yep, we'll send that question over to the staffer then.
Yes, and I took note of it. Thank you.
There we go. Commissioner Shannon.
And this one is for just my education, just a general question. Very specific example. St. Anne's School in Arlington, Virginia, borders the the Custis Trail on 66, and the parking lot where they have recess is also the place where balls go in and almost hit cyclists that are on the trail. And the question was actually asked of me of how would, and part of the issue is that part of the parking is, I think, county land. And so any changes to that to put a fence or something of that sort, the question was asked, what is the right way to go about approaching that?
That is beyond my pay grade, and that is I would shoot that question nicely phrased and as detailed as possible to Ms. Obukoya, and she can hopefully find the correct staffer inside the county.
Please repeat the question. I'm sorry, I was typing.
He's gonna email you because
I'll write it to you.
It's in the weeds. It's deep in the weeds.
Okay, so maybe it's good that I missed it. Okay, thank you. Send it to me.
Anybody else? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you all.